Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It is Joshua Millage and Chris Badgett with another episode of LMScast. Today, we're talking about growth cycles of exponentially advancing technology in learning management systems. That sounds fancy, Chris. What are we talking about? Let's dig into it.
Well, this is kind of a segue from our previous episode about exponential education entrepreneurship, but we're going to get a little more into the nitty-gritty of the technology, exponentially advancing technology or accelerating technology in the context of learning management systems.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also built off of the work of Peter Diamandis and Stephen Kotler's work. They create a lot of content around these ideas of exponentially growing technology. So I think to start off, I think it's important to talk about the diffusion of life cycle of innovation in the context of business, because that's a classic one. That if you understand that,
Mm-hmm.
then it's easier to get into where we're going to go here. So that's just to simply put, when business comes online, it's not going to be around forever per se. There's a life cycle to a business. At the beginning, you have innovators and early adopters, then early majority, late majority, laggards.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of a natural bell curve that you see in certain businesses. So that's like an example of a business over time.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look into exponentially growing technology, there's a similar sort of life cycle. And Stephen Kotler provides us with six words that all start with the letter D to help see how a technology advances into the category of exponential technology. And the first is digitalization. And that's when a technology becomes exponential once it becomes digitalized. So, in
Mm-hmm.
our context with learning management systems, it's pretty straightforward that you can now teach and learn and have community online in the digital world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it doesn't have to require any sort of in-person interaction.
Yeah, and it's scalable. You know, as soon as you go digital, there you've got that scalability factor, and
Yeah.
that's the E in front of learning. I mean, we've had those tools for a while.
Yeah, and one other thing I want to add there is that and maybe this is in one of the D's that I don't know about, so I apologize if I hopscotch, but the cost associated with the technology. So for us, I mean, the old way of teaching required a classroom, which required lots of money and lots of time and resource to get that, put together. Um, Now it doesn't. Now, a
And
shared
that's
hosting plan and WordPress. Not that I would recommend shared hosting, but I mean, you could get a WordPress install up and going pretty quickly and install a learning management system and you'd be off to the races.
and that's demonetization. Um,
Ah, so I am
so
hopscotching.
yeah, which is good.
Because I have
Uh,
some coffee here. That's why.
yeah, and the classic example of demonetization, like you mentioned in education, is right there. It's like think about a college education in computer science versus what's happening in places like Team Treehouse or other places where you learn how to code, or people using WordPress sites to sell their coding knowledge and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You've kind of doesn't necessarily mean you have to pull all the money out, but at the very end, like now where we don't buy film for our cameras anymore, most people don't. We pretty much demonetize pictures, right? Once you
Right.
have the camera, they're free.
Right.
And you don't even need the camera anymore. You can do it with your phone.
Right.
Um, the next one is deception.
Mm-hmm.
So these technologies get introduced, and it takes a while for them to get up to speed. And there's all this like hype in the beginning, and they fall into this deceptive period, and people kind of dismiss them. So there's that famous quote, like first they laugh at you, then they ignore you,
Yeah.
then they love you, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I could see that. Like I remember, this is just I have a background in anthropology. I remember one of my cohorts doing his senior presentation on online culture, and this is going to date my age, but this was in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get it. I didn't think there would be like online. I just didn't make sense that people would form groups and behave in an anthropological or sociological way online. But he was so ahead of his time. I was like, wow, that's amazing looking back.
Yeah.
but I had some doubt, or I didn't understand where he was coming from, and we've seen this with like robotics and artificial intelligence and all kinds of things. But
Yeah, we underestimate these things, and then all of a sudden they're ubiquitous, and they're like everywhere in our lives.
yeah,
So,
and I could see that with learning management systems. Like some of it's deceptive. Like right now, we're with the innovators and the early adopters.
right.
Uh, a lot of teachers are no, no, I don't want to do technology, or some entrepreneurs or subject matter experts. They don't have the clarity yet to be able to like teach and bring their material online at a global scale. They don't believe it yet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that deceptive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I think it's really important to um, recognize the deception there, and for the personal motivation to keep on charging when you feel that conviction to share what you have to share online.
Hmm.
Because I think you come across the resistance at one point or another in your journey as an online education entrepreneur or just a teacher in general. It's like, is my information valuable? Will people buy it? You go through the deception, and you could hear a stat like that and use that as fodder for your cannon in terms of sitting like killing your project and nixing it. And I think consistency is important. And there is some of the things as we're talking about this that don't go out of style. And human connections that reaching out like cold and reaching out to people and asking them, hey, like, come and check this out over here that I'm working on. um, I've done that a lot recently with Twitter, which is leveraging an exponential communication platform, but utilizing it to find people who are interested in the things that I'm interested in, and then connecting with them and engaging them at quantity, at scale, um, knowing that not everyone's going to respond, but the people that do respond, then I'm hyper human. I should
Yeah.
I should coin that term, hyper human. But no, I mean I just interact. I act like the Twitter becomes a text message at that point, and I'm text messaging a friend. So yeah, so that's just to springboard off that a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, another D is disruption. So that is where a technology plays a role in subverting an established industry or industries. So clearly, with learning management systems, um, when a professor or a subject matter expert of some kind comes online, it can be very disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, really the computer science industry, especially in the realm of learning how to code, does not happen through the traditional system anymore. It's been disrupted, and those folks in that niche are kind of leading the charge. Whereas like there's some other industries that are late to come online. Like for example, like that's one of the reasons why my wife and I went into gardening education, because it's not as far ahead as like learning how to program.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, there's that disruptive quality to exponential technology in the same way that the digital camera disrupted the film analog SLR camera.
Yeah, it's a great point. Sometimes you hit these break points in technology where everything shifts. Now you can't even buy film. It's crazy. you
Yeah,
know.
and you almost didn't even notice it happened. It just slowly
Now,
disappeared, and
yeah,
it just that's what happened, and it got free, and we didn't even really notice that
yeah.
either.
Back in 2002, 2001, I was studying photography in England and Scotland, and I was, I think, the last class that learned how to shoot photos on chromes, which are basically, they look like slides, but it's a way to get really high quality photos. And you scan those chromes and digitize them afterwards. So I was at this weird like shift of like moving, still shooting analog, but then taking it digital. And we took it through this ice scanner that used infrared light to eliminate the dust on, I don't know, the scan. I mean, it was just, looking back, it's crazy. I mean, I have a more powerful camera in my phone than I did when I took that class with the $2,000 camera I bought. I also have more processing power in my phone than I did in the laptop I took to school in '06.
Hmm.
You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild,
It happens
and
so
it,
fast. Like you said, we don't even notice, too.
and the pace is accelerating. That's the exponential part. And
Mm-hmm.
then the next one is dematerialization.
Mm.
So that's an example of like you were just saying with your phone, there's all these other things that no longer exist. Like you don't have a Walkman or a cassette or a CD player. It's all just like in the phone.
Yeah.
You don't have a separate camera, so there's these things that are becoming dematerialized.
Right.
And that's why we're big proponents here when we talk about online education and learning management systems, that it's important not to get too focused on getting things too cluttered. Like really, it's an opportunity to curate,
Mm-hmm.
simplify, get to the high impact stuff, focus on the learning experience
Mm-hmm.
more than all the stuff you can cram behind the paywall or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's that dematerialization part. And I mean, what we're saying is you don't have to go get some real estate and several $1,000,000 to build a school. You can do it with our WordPress plugin and a hosting account. So there's much more less dematerial. It's not saying that those other things aren't important and don't have their place in society where we are right now, but there is a disruption and that also plays out in dematerializing things.
Yeah. And a huge opportunity and all that. I love it. That's cool. Neat.
Cool. Well, I'm on to the last one here, which is democratization.
Okay. Which is a
And
word we like to throw around.
yeah, and uh, I liked the best way to understand democratization in terms of technology, and especially in what we do, is I like it how Matt Mullenweg said a long time ago that the purpose of WordPress was to democratize publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is like anybody can become a media outlet. And we've seen like small blogs get huge,
Mm-hmm.
and there's other people's blogs who don't make it, but that's the open fair market competitive thing or whatever.
Right.
Um, so what we're doing is we're in a space where in online education and learning management systems, we want to democratize online education. So empower other education entrepreneurs to have the tools that you don't need to start a school or, um, get accredited and whatever. If you're ready, just teach, put it out there, see if the market, if you can reach them first, and
Yeah.
second, see if that you've got a good fit.
Yeah. Yeah. A, a great point. I mean, when the cost goes to the bottom of the barrel when it comes to building this stuff, things can get really interesting really fast. And I think it comes back to like then you just have who's quality, like what does quality look like? Like I had a friend ask me one time. He's like, how does Bill Gates or like Warren Buffett value a pair of jeans? And
Yeah.
it's an interesting idea because it's like, well, to them, I mean, they're not going to know the difference between a $20 pair of jeans and a $400 pair of jeans in their bank account. They're not going to feel that. So like, what are they actually looking at? What's the value now? And you can kind of apply that to this. It's like now that everyone has access to like everyone can buy expensive jeans or cheap jeans. Which ones are they going to buy? Well, they're going to value things differently. They're probably going to buy to things like the story. So like the person that has the ability to create a course on basket weaving, who's in some sort of culture where that's huge, versus someone who's like the world's best basket weaver, the cost of trying both courses is low or relatively low. I mean, of course, they could price them high, but the cost of building them is low. It just allows you to get experimental. It allows you to not have that cost barrier and value things differently. And I think democratization is pretty interesting when it's applied to education, because now the guy who is the genius in the backwoods of Kentucky can actually distribute his knowledge out there and have impact.
Globally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
true. So
Amazing.
cool. So that's the 6Ds.
That's it. If you want to see the article that we're referencing, head on over to bigthink.com, and you can just Google Stephen Kotler's 6Ds of exponential technology, and you'll find that article. It's a great article, well worth a read. If you're listening to this on iTunes, I'd encourage you to Google Stephen Kotler. You'll find a lot of great information if you're into this kind of thing about exponential growth. But yeah, thank you, and good luck with your online course project, your learning management system project, and there's never been a better time.
Right on. All right. Until next week, we'll talk to you soon.